Welcome to Groups This Week. As a church, we exist to help all people become fully devoted followers of Jesus. We believe doing life together is a crucial part of that journey. During this time, we're going to unpack and dig deeper into the sermon we heard this past week. Let's dive in as we continue to grow in our faith, knowledge, and love of Jesus together. Welcome, community groups. This past week, we were in week 2 of our Christmas series, The Light Has Come. And Sam, we took a look at John 1, verse 4 and 5 this Sunday. Light shines in the darkness.
Yeah, it's good. It's a lot there in John 1.
Can you read us the passage?
I would love to.
Just kind of frame our time here.
Yeah, John chapter 1, this is in the ESV. And I will read starting in verse 4. Here's what it says. In him was life, and the life was the light of men. The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness has not overcome it.
Wow. And so I know last week we looked at the beginning verses of John, and right at the beginning it says, in the beginning.
Yeah, which is that throwback to Genesis chapter 1, verse
Absolutely.
1, right?
And I think we see even parallels like in this passage here, talking about light, back to Genesis as well.
Yeah.
Like, can you unpack that for a bit?
Yeah, exactly. So John is making this strong case in the first 3 verses that Jesus didn't just come, he didn't just begin existence when he was born into the world, but he is transcendent, that he was at the very moments of creation, that he was there with the Father and the Spirit creating everything that is. And then, like you said, we see life and light, which are 2 things that we see in the creation narrative as well. God speaks, he creates light in the darkness. He brings light into darkness, so there's that throwback to that. He puts life on earth. He puts breath in our lungs. And so we see that happen. But one of the cool things that John does, so in English, when we read the life, like he is the light and the life, we don't have multiple words for life. But in the original Greek, the word that John uses here for life is actually zoe life, which isn't just life, like breath in our lung, like life, physical life, but it's actually abundant life to the fullest. And so John is pointing to Jesus and saying that he is the one that brings it's in relationship with this Jesus. And it's not only that he points to life, but that he is the life. And this is something Jesus will go on to say in John later in the book as well, when he says, I'm the way, the truth, and the life.
Right.
He also says that he is the light, right? And
light
then later that we are the light, a city on a hill.
Wow.
And lots of cool references from this point.
So many connections.
Yeah.
And then really, like, I think the thrust of like these 2 verses here is really just talking about like how light is contrasting darkness. Mm-hmm. And we see the phrase that says, the darkness has not overcome the light. Mm-hmm. Like, what does that mean?
Yeah, I mean, one of the things it's pointing back to is Jesus' death and resurrection. And so saying, there were moments when Jesus was up on the cross. I can't imagine being one of his disciples. It would have felt in that moment like darkness was overcoming the light. Mm-hmm. And so in that moment, as darkness tried to stomp out Jesus and what he was doing, in the resurrection, we see this bursting forth of light. And so in one way, it points back to that, but it's not just that. It's also from that moment that, there's times in history, and we can even look around in our world right now, where it can feel like darkness is winning. It just feels so dark. The world can feel so bleak. But John is making this statement that the light, the darkness cannot overcome the light. And we even see into Revelation, Revelation 22. So the darkness can't overcome it. The light continues to move forward. And then there's a day that is talked about in Revelation where there'll actually be no need for the sun at all, right? Because Jesus himself will be the radiant sun that brings light to the whole world. So it's a really cool connection where one day there will be no darkness.
The light of the world.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah, so Sam, you were mentioning that like we live in a dark world. Mm-hmm. And, as we just even zone in on like the context in which we live, like the Tri-Cities even, like what are the pockets of darkness that you see?
Yeah, there's lots we could point to. I think one would be anxiety and mental health, and just the darkness that can bring even to your own thoughts and experience of life. And then there's many others we could point to, like domestic violence is a horrible darkness and oppression that people live under. What would be some others that you would think of?
Yeah, I think loneliness even, and maybe
Huge.
that's tied to mental health,
Yeah.
right? But I think like we're such a connected like society, like over social media, and yet so lonely.
Yeah.
And I just wonder if maybe that's something that the enemy's using to just, like we're tempted to believe lies about ourselves, about God. So I think loneliness is just like, it's an epidemic right now.
Yeah.
I think that's one area. Even just like, it feels like everyone's just a little bit more on edge these days. Like ever since the pandemic, like it just seems like whether you're in line or you're in traffic
Road
or
rage, yeah.
yeah, exactly. Like it just seems like everyone's like a little more quick-tempered. And I just wonder if there's like, underlying like anger and pain that's like just coming to the surface, and like maybe Jesus wants to shine his light in those areas.
Yeah, and then even as we look on a global scale, you think about, darkness, I think about war and oppression that's happening in Iran and other places like around the world. So there's lots of evidence of darkness, but then there's also a lot of evidence of light. And we see, I think that's today, but also as we look throughout history. Here would be some examples, right? Like before Jesus came on the scene 2,000 years ago, even like a virtue like humility, it was not thought of as a positive thing at all in society. And then Jesus comes in. We see God coming into the flesh in the person of Jesus, the humility of God, and then everything that Jesus taught about the best way to be human and what it looks like to live out the kingdom in the here and now. He flipped the script, and now I think if you ask anyone, Christian or not, humility is something that is really admired in another person. And then we see how Christians throughout history have actively been the light of Christ in things like even starting hospitals.
Yeah.
Right? Or orphanages. Like these are things that came out of a Christocentric worldview and a trying to live out, Jesus' Sermon on the Mount and his other teachings in their everyday context. And then even today, there's lots of beautiful evidence of the light even amidst the darkness. Like, I don't know, where would your head go for some of that?
Yeah, I mean, I think of like, I think his name's Scott Harrison, who like is
Charity
the founder
Water.
of Charity Water. Yeah, like, his story is like he used to just like get drunk all the time, was basically convicted by the Holy Spirit to just provide clean drinking water for those in poverty. And so that's his whole like life mission.
So cool.
I think of even organizations like Compassion or World Vision with child sponsorships and seeking to bring dignity and provide basic needs to children.
And then you even see in our own church context, like there's some cool ways that we're able to bring light in the darkness through things like our food pantry, addressing poverty right here in the Tri-Cities. And the clothing center, even Alpha would be an example of that, where people are coming in, like you're saying, very anxious or lonely or, questioning why they exist. These big questions of life and finding hope and meaning and relationship with Christ. These are all evidences of the light moving forward, shining in the darkness.
Yeah, I think it's so encouraging that like wherever we see like darkness in the world, like you'll find Christians there.
Yeah.
Like bring the hope and light of Jesus.
So true.
That's what we're called to, right?
Yes.
And maybe like, as we kind of wrap things up here, like I would love to just know as well, like as we think just even about themes of darkness and light, like what are even like the implications for our own discipleship journey? So we've been talking about the world, the city, like what about ourselves?
Well, as the light shines even on us as humans, it exposes darkness within us. Because darkness isn't just something that's out there, like those bad people out there. There's darkness even within my own heart. Even before we started this video, I had to confess to you, from a conversation that we had earlier, and I felt like I said something I shouldn't have said. There's darkness in me, and when the light shines, it can be scary because no one wants to be exposed. That's very vulnerable, but it also brings healing. And when we bring things that are in the dark into the light, it's actually for our good, and it brings so much life and freedom, right? I don't have to hold on to that. I can expose that I'm imperfect and I make mistakes, and then it creates space for Jesus to do some of his most transformative work. And so I think one of the discipleship implications is just that, is when Jesus shines his light on us, it's this invitation to bring it into bring what's in our hearts that's not pure, that's kind of gross, and the motives and all these things into the light. And I mean, if we don't, he will.
Yeah.
Because the light will shine in the darkness.
Yeah, it can't hide.
Yeah.
I know. That makes me think of even that G.K. Chesterton quote where, like, I think at the time he lived, there was a question posed to the public of, like, what's wrong with the world? And he responded by sending in a few simple words. He said, "Dear sirs, I am yours truly, G.K. Chesterton." And I think it's just that awareness that like there's darkness in our own hearts, there's sin in our hearts. We need to bring that to Christ and have him shine the light on us. And
for
he's
sure.
a God of grace.
I love that. That's so good.
Well, thanks so much, Sam, for helping us understand this a little more. We hope you enjoyed the teaching today. If you're wanting to follow along with our community group's discussion guide with your group, you can head to cachurch.ca/media, where you can find the discussion guide. Not only are there questions there related to the sermon, but there's also prayer prompts that relate to the passage or the topic that we were talking about, and practices that you can, on an individual level or a group level, begin integrating into your life to not only bring this knowledge into your mind, but to begin living it out.